I'm the Oliver Pickard and welcome to my workshop. Now, there is a reason the Dyane is jacked up like it's been worked on at the Paris-Dakar, and that is because we have finished doing the back end of the car. It has been seam sealed. It's not going to be painted yet until we've finished with everything. That's the last job. Once we've made everything perfect and pretty, then we'll do the paint job. But all of that's been seam sealed, and we've put the rear rod end on the suspension and put a tyre on it and a wheel on it. And I've adjusted the suspension so it's a bit low. That way I can jack up that side of the car, because in this episode we're going to be doing the spring cans. Now, no, the spring can on that side specifically. Now I'll be able to show you actually how all 2CV suspension works and all of that. That's the cool thing about this episode. But the unfortunate thing about this episode is I'm removing the spring can so that I can scrape off the underseal that's behind the spring can, and so we can paint all the chassis behind it and all that. I'll also refresh the spring can and make it all nice, put some new gaiters on it and all that stuff. So let's get stuck in, shall we? Okay, so if you'll just join me down here. Right, so the way 2CV suspension works, if I don't mention this in this video I'll get loads of comments about it. But really quick rundown of how 2CV suspension works. Obviously this is an arm that goes up and down. It's a trailing arm. This rod is connected to a spring that's in this can. There's a rod end on here that attaches onto there, and the knife edge is the thing that goes through it. When you hit a bump, the wheel goes up, it pulls on the rod, and that compresses the spring. It is a pull rod suspension, much like a Buell motorbike has on the rear end. If you're American, that's probably your best reference. Now, this, being an earlier style suspension, has big rubber bungs here, and the reason for that is when you hit a bump with the front wheel, it preloads the suspension, preloads the can, if you will, to accept the bump at the rear. So it gives you a really nice magic carpet ride. So what we're going to be doing today is the rod end is stuck on the other end. So the thing that goes on here is stuck on the other end, and I can't get it off on the car. So my best way to do that is to take the spring can off completely, and then I'll be able to scrape off all the underseal that's under here and behind on the chassis, and we can clean up all the spring can itself and clean it all, and I can get that rod end off, and then when our new rod ends and knife edges arrive, I can fit all new and fancy and shiny. Now, you can replace these spring cans, and a lot of people say don't bother rebuilding them, just replace them. That's okay, but they're really, really expensive, and these aren't in bad condition. In fact, the rubber bungs on them, the big rubber donuts, are like brand new. So we're not going to be replacing them because they're also like 600 and something each. We're just going to leave them as they are and clean them up and make them pretty and lubricate them. But first things first, let's take these big nuts off and we can get it cleaned up. I've also taken the exhaust off for ease of working on it. But you need a giant spanner. Oh, I've already loosened it. But I don't have a giant spanner, so there's one here and one there, a nut there, and two at that side as well. Quite often, here, these two cutouts, where you would put, like, if this side is stuck, you get like a screwdriver. I'm sure there's a special Citroen tool, but you get a screwdriver and put it through like that. But quite often the threads get all knackered there, so just make sure, and if they are knackered, don't try and take the nut off because it'll get stuck. Just clean it up with a file first. Now this is the rod end here, and that should be a knife edge. But it's not, because somebody in their infinite, shall we say, wisdom has chosen to put a bolt through it. Now, it is a brass bolt, and I'm assuming this happened at some time when the person involved couldn't get a knife edge. But that's why we're replacing the that's why we are replacing the bolt, and we're also replacing the rod end as well, because that will be damaged from the thread on the bolt probably. And we've ordered a kit That's 4 new rod ends and 4 new knife edges. These are always covered in horrible goo because, of course, people grease them. And it's one of the reasons why I like doing mine with a little, one of the little tubes of grease you get from a bike shop. Also, runnier grease for these is better than thicker grease because the knife edges are sintered, so they're full of tiny little holes. And a thinner grease can get in the holes, whereas a thicker grease just sits on top. And of course, the thick grease you're not going to get in. And you can see the damage that the rod end and the car going up and down has done to the bolt. It's bad. By the way, I've made a video all about don't do this, never do this, replace with proper parts. I assume this was done at some point before my parents bought the car, and my dad actually didn't know it had a bolt in it at all. But both front ends were done like that. Now, please don't do this. I've done a video all about 2CV suspension and how to adjust it. And I've also done a video called 5 Easy Fixes where I actually grease my knife edges and show you how to check them. Yeah, don't do this. But that's no good. Now, I'm less concerned about what the rod end has done to the bolt and more concerned about what the bolt has done to the rod end, which is why we're going to be replacing both. We're going to be putting brand new rod ends in, and we're going to be putting brand new knife edges in, obviously, because that's going in the bin. Part of what makes this job an absolute pain is that these threads here are full of under seal, possibly wax oil, and goo and rust and all the horrible things. So, my friend the big orbital wire brush and angry face. You'll notice I'm using a screwdriver that has like a hex shaft. And the reason I'm doing that is if you use a screwdriver like this, it's just a big flathead, and you put it in, it's really easy to not put it in all the way and do that. And if you do that, you can actually bend the threads here. And that will make it exceedingly hard to get your lock nut off, so don't do that. If you're going to use one of these. I have 100% surety that there is some special tool that someone is already writing in the comments, I've got the special tool for doing that, and it's cost 500 quid. I know there is probably a special tool, but I don't have it, and I'm not waiting for it, and I'm not buying one. So, a very good quality. Who makes these actually? Irrisola screwdriver. They are actually good screwdrivers. They've got a big bolt head as well, so you can get a spanner on them for really angry stuff. By the way, I put links in the description to many of the tools that I use, because I know a lot of people always ask in the comments and stuff, what's that tool and where do you get that tool and that kind of thing. I put Amazon links, because Amazon does this really cool thing where if you use my link to buy stuff, it actually helps support the channel. And as much as I like supporting small companies and kind of mum and dad type, local businesses, it's very good for finding tools and stuff like that. And just by using the link, you help support the channel. But like I say, if there is any tools or anything like that internationally, it's very handy to have an Amazon link to say, oh yeah, this is the product name and this is the product number. So I always leave Amazon links down below, and by using those links and stuff, you can help support this channel. I don't like using grips like this at all. They are a last ditch attempt, or whatever you'd call it. They're a if you don't have anything else kind of thing. But I don't have anything else, and I can't get anything else, so this is what I've got. I could make a spanner, but it wouldn't be much better. We're getting there then. We've got some movement in it. it's very frustrating when you do a job like this, and sometimes the best thing for you to do, if you can't progress, is to walk away and actually do something else for 20 minutes and then come back to it. Like spray some Facom goo on it, spray some W40 type stuff on it. And my Facom goo got warm the other day, and all the gas has expanded out of it, and so I need another can. WD-40 does this as well. Over about 100 Fahrenheit, or whatever that is, 40 something. It has a tendency to boil when the gas cooks off. Rubbish. So now I have pathetic, drippy anti-seize stuff, but such is life. But yeah, if you can't get it off, the best thing to do sometimes is spray some stuff on it and go do something else for a bit. I got it, or I don't get it. That's it, I got it. Haha! Right, so what you want to do, that's now dropped into there. So this can now be pulled out. Like that. And we're actually going to push it back in again in a second while I get the other one off. But that just shows you how it does. And then that way, push it back in again for a second, just so it holds itself up. But I've got to get this side off, and then you get that side off. You pull this side out, and then you pull that side out. You don't actually need to get this end lock ring off, you just need to get some space on it. The same on this side, really. It just makes it easier. You could leave that end lock ring on a little bit. But once you can slide that one that way and that one that way, there's in this bracket here, there's actually a gap, and you can pull it and take the rod end out that way, and then you just pull it and it comes out. But that is much easier said than done. Now apparently, so I hear, these big rubber bump stops here can occasionally get rusted, especially on the front, onto those tubes. And I wish I had a better solution for it, but the only way that I've heard, apparently, you can get them off is by smacking them with a really big hammer. But I didn't have that problem, not at all, not at all. That's why I don't look frustrated and covered in rust and gross. I don't. This look, mine just comes straight out. and that one. Come on, there we go. There we go. See, all these people who say Oliver never has any problems, his bolts just come straight out. Oliver, why do you never? I do. It's frustrating and it's annoying. So that pulls that way, that comes off there. Oh, stuck in my light. Get out the light. There we go. And that's the spring can off. Right, now before I do anything else, I need to have a tidy up. Small victories. There's two flats on it. Make sure you clamp it where the flats are. There's the two flats are for a 9mm spanner. I know, bizarre. I actually have, where is it? This one. This is my 9mm suspension 2CV adjusting spanner. You'll notice it's got a tiny little bend on. That just helps you wind it round in the confines of the underneath of a 2CV. But this was too stubborn for that. So now I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to make sure I get all these threads as clean as possible, because I'll show you a trick for removing stubborn rod ends. Now I forgot that spring cans have oil in, and the reason that I forgot is I didn't expect this one to have oil in it. But never underestimate a small amount of oil's ability to make an incredibly large mess. Right, I'm going to have to get some more kitchen roll. Right, so, stuck rod end. I've cleaned all of the schmutz off. In fact, if I get a piece of... forgot the English word for it. Completely forgot. Completely blank brain. Kitchen roll. That was a smooth brain moment, wasn't it? my French still isn't perfect. People ask me all the time, how's my French? My French still is not perfect. And because of that, I can't just go from English to French really easily. It takes me a minute to get into it. It's not like Spanish. My Spanish is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I can dream and do dream in Spanish. I don't dream in French yet. And I can't... In Spanish, I can swap from an English conversation to a Spanish conversation like that. I can talk to two people at once. One in English and one in Spanish. But with French, it takes me a minute to go from one to the other. And I had to remember the English word for an appointment. And I'm going, what's the word for a cita in English? A cita is the Spanish word. And I could not remember. I'm like, a rendezvous, a cita, what's the English word for it? And people looking at me like I'm insane. But I had to remember the English... I don't know why I had to remember the English word for it, but I did. By the way, big spanner, clean, and then tighten it. Right, loosen, tighten, because you risk seizing it. There we go. Once we tighten it down onto the oil we just put on the shaft, it works very well. So now what we're going to do, we're going to tighten it down onto the Facom glue we just put on the shaft, like that. Get plenty of this on the threads, and then we can just undo it. We had to remember the English word for appointment. Could not remember English word for appointment to save my life, and that's the weird thing. It's always my English that goes. I'm never like, what's the word in French? No, I've got the word in French. It's my native language that I struggle to speak. There we go. It's a weird old thing, and of course, everyone that follows me on social media knows I'm dyslexic, especially people that follow me on Twitter. I'm very dyslexic, and it's funny to me because I can speak 3 languages but can't spell in any of them. French is very difficult with the spelling, very, very difficult, especially place names and town names. The spelling and the pronunciation of the two things is completely different. And you often look at... Someone will tell you a town name and they're like, look out, like when you get directions from a friend, they'll be like, look for the sign for this, and then follow that sign till this place, and then turn at this junction, or whatever. And so you'll be looking out for this place. And you're like, okay, where is, I don't know, Le Troy or whatever, and you're looking for this place, and you can't find it, and you're looking, and you're looking, and you're looking, and then eventually you see a place called, it's like Welsh. It's got way too many vowels and consonants. It's about that long. They've had to nail a bit of sign on the end of the sign, and that apparently is Le Troy. And yet it doesn't have any of the letters that would necessitate the pronunciation Le Troy, and that is somehow that town. And that happens a lot in French, a lot. But I'm from the north of England, and we are just as bad. Every now and then I used to watch TV and there'd be like a home programme, and they'd be like, today we are in the picturesque town of Todmorden. And I'm like, okay, that's bad on multiple levels. 1, it's not picturesque, and 2, it's called Todmorden. I almost got pulled up as a kid on my bike by an American, and he's like, excuse me, young man, have you seen the village of Wahalley? I'm like, I think you might find that's Wally. So the English are just as bad, or rather British, apologies, are just as bad. And Welsh, oof. Hey, there we go, rod end off. It was just absolutely impossible to get off on the car, but there we go. A vice, 2 minutes, and a very big spanner. Don't stick a screwdriver through it, because you might damage the screwdriver. It's much better to have something that's designed to put effort in that direction, and doesn't have any flex in it. And if it doesn't go at first, don't force it. Clean the thread more, and then put some more stuff on it, and then go tighten, loosen, and eventually it will let go. You don't need to put heat or anything into it. But if I clean this with my finger, you can see, I've only just washed my hands, but if I clean this with my finger, you can see the damage. If you come under the light, you see the damage that the threads have done to that rod end. I don't trust that rod end as far as I can throw it. And of course our spring can has weed all over the floor. I tell you, you bring them into your home, you treat them with respect, and they pee everywhere. Okay, so now we're going to clean off the underseal underneath the car. And there's no easy way to do it, really. This underseal is very good at staying on until it's not. So, the best way I've found to do it is with a specially sharpened chisel, a kit mat, and a block of wood to put your other bit of kit mat on, so you don't get a stiff neck. And some safety glasses. And what you're going to do is work through it. Make sure you don't have like a burr or anything on the end of your chisel, otherwise it'll just gouge it. And slowly but surely you'll get there. See? There's no easy way to do this. It's one of those jobs that's just incredibly time consuming, but it needs doing. So the best way I found to do it when I did the chassis, the reason I didn't film it, I know this is still technically a chassis and this bit needs doing as well, but the reason I didn't film it was I came in here of an evening and got under the car with my chisel, put a podcast on or some radio and just scraped away. It's a new day and all of our parts have arrived. We have new rod ends, we have new clips, and we have our new knife edges, all shiny and not bolts. Right, now then, before we fit our rod ends and our knife edges, we need to put the knife edges in hot oil. And the best way to do that is using a pan. Now, I advise people, by the way, this isn't a Le Creuset, before I get comments, it's a Godin. And you can find pans like this in every French scrapyard. I've borrowed this one from the chicken run, but it won't be going back in the chicken run. We use them for chickens because they don't blow away. Anyway, before you use one from your kitchen, ask if you value your relationship. But we're going to be putting hot oil in this and letting it soak because these are sintered, which means there are loads of microscopic teeny tiny little holes in them. And when you soak them in hot oil, all the holes open up and the oil soaks into the metal, and then they last much longer. And these are the improved quality ones that last ages, because if you're going to buy them, buy the best. So we'll pop some oil in it and pop it on the stove and warm it up and leave to simmer at gas mark 2. I'm using 15W40s because it's what we've got. So before we start putting things on the car, I've cleaned up all the threads and everything on these, but we haven't painted them. The reason we haven't painted them is because they are threaded, and if you paint them, it gunks up all the thread and you can't get your nuts and bolts on. So what we are now going to do is I'm going to paint it all up with copper slip anti-seize, and that'll stop it getting all gooed up and not being able to take the nuts and bolts off in the future. So I'm just going to liberally paint it all up and get plenty of copper slip in all of the threads. I love the colour of copper slip. Absolutely adore it. It's one of the things that inspired the colour of Jolene's wheels. And because you put copper slip around the wheel nuts when you put the wheels on. So I thought, well, if I paint it the colour of copper slip, I won't end up with a gooey mark, and it works remarkably well. But I love that bronzy colour. Very chocolatey and nice. Those who've watched my previous suspension adjustment videos will know that I suggest putting a piece of tape around the thread so that you know where to adjust, where you're adjusting from and to. And in my previous suspension videos, I said that it doesn't really matter where you put the tape, because if you're adding or subtracting 5mm from X point to X point, it doesn't really matter. However, in this case, what we're going to do is, when I've redone the other side, I measured from the end of the rod end, so like from here to the tape on the front and on the back. So what I'm going to do is, at the front, I'm going to measure 52mm in and put a piece of electrical tape 52mm in, and the rear 50mm in. And the reason I'm going to do that is it will make both spring cans exactly the same. Because one of the most difficult things about doing this job is actually getting the car completely level afterwards and getting all your adjustments exactly the same. This is a problem that I had in the 5 Easy Fixes video. It's very, very tricky if you've got nowhere to start from to then get it all level and perfect. Now, if you can measure from the rod end, from the end of the thread, you actually have a really good starting point, and so both sides of the car end up exactly equal. And because everything's going to be new, it should be the same on both sides, and that will give us a really good starting point to adjust from there. Now, when we put the rod ends on the thread itself, we will leave a gap between the tape and the end of the rod end of 10mm. This gives us plenty of slack to be able to put the knife edge in. I'm saying this because it's easier for me to say it now than when I'm under the car, but it's loads easier to get your knife edge in if you've got plenty of room to do it. And then once they're all on and all the same, we can then adjust it all up as it needs to be. And you have plenty of room between your tape and your rod end to wind it in or out and take a measurement, and you won't end up removing your tape and having to adjust. But also putting the knife edges in is a massive faff, and so it just makes it so much easier. Right, let's get this off and then onto the car. So before we put our spring can on, we're going to measure the lengths, right? So this one is, pull it out of course, this one is 48.5, and this one is 42.5. So this is our front. So get our nice little stainless rule, pop it on. We want a piece of tape that is 52 mil from the edge. Like that. There you go. And then we have a nice suspension adjustment mark. There you go, 50mm. Okay, so what I've done here is I've set everything out as I'm going to need it. This is really important because at this stage it's incredibly easy to get things mixed up, and then you have a suspension that you can't adjust properly and you don't quite know why. So I've got my rear bump stop, I've got my rear tube, my front bump stop, and of course a lock ring for each side. And I've got my tape in the right orientation, so I know that I'm putting everything on in the right orientation. This is really important, like I said, because at this stage, if you hurriedly make a mistake and put the front tube on the wrong way, it can mess you up later on. So we're going to put our rear tube in first, like that, and I've got it adjusted all the way out, and we'll adjust it up later. And then put that one on, like that, and we'll put our bump stop on as well. They go on a lot easier than they came off, which is the way it should be. Right, it's a two-man job this, really. It's very, very heavy. There we go. Through it goes. And we thread the other end on just as we threaded this end on. And once we get it supported, there we go. Right, now you can take your hand off. That's better. Once it's all supported, it's easy. Until you get your spring can supported, it's very ungainly and difficult to move, and it's really something that you don't want to be dropping on yourself. But once you get it on, it's no problem. And don't worry about the finger marks, we'll get them off after. So I'm going to screw my lock rings on, but not tight yet. I'm going to give myself plenty of room for adjustment. And then what I'll do, I'll measure the other side up, and I'll get both of them exactly the same. And that gives you a really good starting point then, because whatever you do on one side, you can do on the other, and they should end up identical. I'm measuring from the edge of the thread here to the lock nut, and that's because this edge here has been filed and it was all burred up and all sorts. So you don't really know what you can trust. Now then, I won't nip anything up, I won't tighten it up by, locking them together or anything until we've got everything on and sorted and leveled up. You need to be able to see it on the ground really before you start doing your final finishing and tightening and stuff like that. But for now, we'll get it all cleaned up, which is easy because we use nice paint. Get it all cleaned up, and we can start putting our knife edges on. I can relax now. That bit is always a bit tense for me because I'm not so good at remembering numbers. I just don't have a mind for numbers, and so it's one of those things where I write everything down in a notebook and then I just have to measure it 16 times to make sure I get everything right, and both sides are exactly the same. Even if it's wrong, it doesn't matter because both sides are equally as wrong as each other, so you've got a really good place to start adjusting from. So any adjustment you do on the other side can be done on this side, and they'll both end up the same. The problem with this suspension that preloads itself with the interconnected springs is that adjusting the front can actually adjust the back. It's a really bizarre situation. So you really need to make sure that you get it exactly the same, and then that way you don't put it on the ground and it's like a wonky table. The good news is that now everything's the same. These rod ends are exactly the same on both sides. There isn't a long one and a short one, and I can finally relax. Now these are the Franzone ones, the CP ones, and they've got a greasing hole in the top. So you want to make sure that that greasing hole goes upwards. You don't put it downwards like that. Other than that, it doesn't really matter. So no matter what you do, you may have to put in half a turn. But what we'll do before we do any of that, before we even put them on, is I'm going to put a little bit of copper slip in the end, thusly. So I'm going to paint the end of the rod all the way up to my piece of tape. Slip our gator on. There we go. Now, I'm not going to connect it onto there because we are yet to lubricate our spring can, remember. So I'm going to leave this one loose. I've put the other one on though. And then we're going to get a little bit of copper slip and just paint up this lovely thread here. And I'm not going to put it up and in yet. Instead, I'm going to push the rod back and just screw it on like this. And then that way, when I get exactly 10 millimeters from the tape, I've got my little straight edge so I can measure it. I'll be able to make sure this hole is at the top. Because as you can see, you can actually rotate the rod in the can because it's currently not against the spring. And then that way, you make sure that you've got it at the right length and that it's at the top. Because you don't want your knife edge exposed to weather. Ta-da! Precision on the least precise car in the world. Right, now we can put our knife edges in. So now I have my squeezy tube of grease. I like these squeezy tubes, they're good. And this is Teflon grease. Give it a bit of a coating all the way around. And see, this is the bonus of the hole. You can actually squidge it in from there, but because we have access, just squirt something for now. Rustle it. So I've put my nice red grease in my rod end and I've cleaned this out as well. Now remember, it's 14mm knife edge at the rear and a 12 in the front, I think it is. And now you can see how leaving that 10mm really gives us room just to nicely slide our knife edge in. If you don't do that, you can end up fighting it. Still not easy. It has a tendency to hit the other side and want to do whatever it wants to do. So what we'll do, we'll slide it out and then we'll push it all the way through so you can actually see it like that to the back. Now we'll put our rod end in like that, slide it forward, and it should, but it doesn't, come straight through. Never put knife edges on and they not be a pain. And then always make sure that you put your pin on in a manner that it's easily removed later. So always put it on with a loop down. I've seen people put them on with a loop up and then you have to kind of roll them round to get them off, which is a bit of a pain. There we go. Now can you see how we can still wiggle it about? That's great. That's because we gave ourselves a bit of room. It's always easier when you give yourself room, and then you can put some more grease in and fill her up. There we go. This is my spring can lubrication apparatus, otherwise known as a little piece of aluminium tube with a funnel on the end. And it lubricates spring cans kind of thusly. Now, the recommended lubricant for 2CV spring cans is castor oil because it's nice and sticky. This spring can had gearbox oil in it, weirdly, by the smell of it. But we're going to be doing it right. So you need to be able to get your aluminium tube right in and put some in. I don't know what the correct amount is, but some. They do some kits with like a synthetic-y version of it, I think it is. But yeah, the old school way of doing it is castor oil and a big long tube. Blow it in. Not the most hygienic way of doing it, but it stops it so that when you pull the tube out, it isn't full of oil still. So, like that. And now that won't drip everywhere because I've got it that way. And we can put our gator on now. We've bought some new bump stops as a finishing touch. The only slight issue is that might need some adjustment. Well, there we have it. Fully rebuilt suspension. I just need to finish off doing the other side now. But I'm really, really happy. You know, someone asked me in a previous video's comments, what's my biggest kind of pet peeve myth surrounding a car or cars in general? And it is that classic cars are unreliable. And it's simply not true. Classic cars can be utterly reliable. You know, I've proven that by daily driving my what is now 59-year-old 2CV for the last 3 years. But often classic cars have had a past, they have had a history, they have had other owners. And as nice as it is to drive a wonderful, kind of completely original, unrestored, perfect condition car that has had a wonderful list of owners through the years that have kept it in a dry sealed garage and always loved for it and cared for it, there's something really nice about taking a car that's a bit of a mutt. A car that's a bit of an unloved example, a car that's never going to win a concourse, and making it beautiful again, and making it safe again, and making it nice for my family. And that's the important thing about this. Cars are metal, they are boxes, they are really soulless, but we give them a soul quite often. We give them a soul with the things that we do with them, the places that we take them, and the stories that we have to tell. And now I have a wonderful story for this car. You know, this car obviously came out of someone's garden or barn at some point and was put back on the road. But now I have a story to tell of making a car that's safe and good to drive for my family, and that's a beautiful thing. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done on it. And yet there's more work to be done, so make sure you tune in next week for some front of chassis repairs and stuff. And if you'd like to watch some more of the Dyane videos, if this is your first one and you want to see the progress of us cutting all the bum out of this car and replacing it all, there's a Dyane playlist right there. I've also done a review on this car before I knew it was so dangerous. There's 2CV videos there for my daily driver. There's Pandora videos there, which is my little kind of mid-engine barn find mutt. That's another mutt. That's another car that was unloved and crashed and set on fire and all sorts, and that we're bringing back to life and better than ever. And of course there's my face, with which you can click to subscribe. So thank you all for watching. Please be awesome to each other, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.